Good evening, Andrew, and everybody else in attendance. This is Ira. Can you hear me okay?
Okay. That one piece of it, I slightly doubt I'm gonna figure out how these.
No, I know I'm not. I'm just gonna get my laptop
Pull out my
out.
computer.
I know. I mean, I'm okay, but I just, you're, and you never did.
Well, no,
They're in there.
yes, but you shut the door and it's locked.
Oh,
Go, Mary.
I'm sorry. Well, why didn't you not?
The coffee is gonna be held hostage.
Good evening, everyone.
Oh,
Good to see you all.
Great, which is locked.
Gonna pick your number for you, Paul.
If you knocked on the door, I would have opened it up.
All right, we got everybody here. 2, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yep, that's everybody. Let's get started.
Mary, I emailed questions.
I don't think your mic.
I got it. Thank you.
Is this thing on? Can you hear me? Okay, thanks. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and call this meeting to order. Welcome, everybody. May 18th board meeting. Let's start it off with the Pledge of Allegiance. Mary, can you lead us in the pledge?
Yes.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, at this time, I'd like to ask for a moment of silent prayer or personal reflection. Thank you. Okay, I'm looking for a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Thank you, Mary.
I'll second.
Thank you, Julio. Any discussion? Do we need to pull this summit contract for now?
Yes.
Let's do that right now then. The summit contract, which is under, does anybody know where it is?
Can F. Andrew, it's 10F.
NF, all right.
Summit Center contract.
We're gonna pull that for this time and we'll circle back to it next time. Is that okay with Mary and Julio?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Next up, we have the oath of office. Are we gonna instate Paul into the other position? Is that what we're?
I believe that's being put on hold until June 7th.
Okay, all right. So then we're just gonna skip over that one too?
Yes.
Okay. Communications and commendations. Do we have any commendations that are not listed?
One thing to mention is all the music in our schools. We've had concerts lately, and one concert this afternoon that was over at Washington West for our second and third graders. And I did have a request at the end of the concert, the very last song, when they sang their Husky Pup song, that we have it for this evening to start off. We didn't get it for this evening. Someone did record it, and I have been assured by Mr. Martell that we'll have that at our next meeting because it will be a real bang up way to start the meeting.
All right.
But congratulations also to all of our musicians. We had a lovely concert here in the high school, and tear jerker because of our seniors. It was very touching and beautiful. And we also had a concert in here last week of OIMS and beautiful music that evening. And we'll just mention again that previously we had gone to the concert, and I believe I was standing right behind you at the concert over at Eastview. So it's been lovely and a real great ending to the year to hear what they've done all year long in our music classes. It's also been senior nights for our athletics, and that's been very exciting too. Amazing to think that this year has gone so quickly. But we're celebrating all of our senior athletes at our senior nights, and this is prom week at OHS. If you haven't noticed, we've had around here, when you went on your tour, you saw that each day has had a theme. And today, just mentioning this, one very interesting pair where students were dressing like teachers and teachers were dressing like students.
Yeah.
We had twins. We had a twin for Dan McGraw, was very interesting. It was borderline on impersonating an officer. But a whole lot of fun and a lot of good spirit going on in the high school. And that's always something to celebrate.
That's fun. At my house, Mr. Vecchio was there this morning. All right. And then we had communications. We got one listed there. Now we'll move on to discussion items. Dr. Geelan, do you have a report from the DEI work group?
Let's see, do I have a report? I do have a report because we did meet. I have to just remember, I've been to a lot of committee meetings, and it's when did I last go to the DEI work group? So the last time we were together, I mentioned what we would be doing at the DEI work group, and we broke off into groups, took that framework, which we'll be sharing more with the greater staff in the next year. So we all get to know the New York State framework. And we came up with some recommendations, or at least started doing our recommendations of looking at just one. And we're also going to use the same, I guess they're icons that they use inside the framework. And the first one was on a welcoming environment, and it's a picture of a hand. We spent some time going through it, breaking off into groups and talking about what would be the recommendations to teachers, recommendations to administrators, and the recommendations to, is the other one, the community group? Community and family. Thank you. Jen Kless has been our leader, so I'm looking to her, and she's also making sure I don't make any mistakes. So those recommendations, that's only for that first part, but just going through the process, it was good for the work group to start to see how do we operationalize the framework. The framework's great. It's something that we all agree with, but it's a different thing altogether when we think about, well, what does it mean to us in our district? How do we operationalize this and make it work? So I thank them for their first steps. We're moving right along. We'll have another meeting where we'll come to a conclusion and make recommendations for the actual committee that will pick up that work moving on in the future. But that work group's done great work this year.
All right, thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Dr. Geelan on the DEI work group? Okay, then we'll move on to tabs. Kelly, do you have something for us?
We met today and we have been speaking about the awards that we would like to be giving out. We decided that we don't feel we can encompass all work groups in one award, so we are actually going to suggest 2 separate awards. Are we naming what that award would be yet? Do we want to make that public, or do we want to make that as a bigger announcement eventually?
Let's do it.
We'll go ahead. We won't keep it a secret anymore. The teacher recognition award is going to be the Ron Shoup Award. And we are planning to have that happen. So hopefully June, beginning of June, first week of June-ish, we are going to open up the nominations for the Ron Shoup Award. We will put a deadline on those nominations of July 31st, and then our committee to choose the teacher will be picked then somewhere in August and announced at the kickoff to the new school year. With that award, we've decided we're actually going to be shooting for nominating one person in each school building to win that award. There will be what we hope will be an award that everybody, you know, every teacher might be hoping for, of a coveted parking space. They will have that parking space then for the first section of the year. So then we would give out the second award. We're going to try and have this happen twice a year. Second award will happen probably end of January, early February. So again, we will have a cutoff for nominations of December 31st. Now, keep in mind, the awards won't get cut off. You know, you can keep nominating, we'll leave it open, but if your nomination comes in dated August 1st, it'll be for the next cycle. If it comes in dated July 31st, it'll be for this cycle. So we're going to keep that open. Hopefully we'll get lots of people wanting to talk up all their teachers. And that will be the first award. The second award is going to be the Leader of the Pack Award. This is going to be more similar to the Harold Dutton Awards. It'll be for all members of the school community who are not teachers. And then that award is going to be a lesser of a prize, but still a very coveted, nice, some sort of drink canister that has a Leader of the Pack Award. We're trying to decide whether or not that it'll be some kind of nice water bottle or beer mug or something nice. And that'll be the Leader of the Pack Award. And for that award, we're probably going to have a few more nominees that we will be more like the Harold Dutton, where it's like 5 to 10 people win it at one time. So we're still in the works to see how many people we get nominations for, but that'll also have the same sort of cutoff, and we'll announce the nominees and the winners at the same time. Twice a year.
Same thing.
Twice a year. Oh, yeah, and the nomination form will be online. It'll be on our district website. We'll make sure it's nice and, you know, front and center when we first started out so that everybody can find it. And then, you know, we're going to be sending out reminders regularly throughout the school year to remind people, hey, has somebody done something great? Let us know so that it doesn't just fall to the wayside and people don't forget about it.
The beverage mug is a nice touch.
Yeah, some form of beverage mug. So that is, we are working on, Dr. Gielan will be working to help us find sponsors to fund these mugs, because we won't be doing it with our school funds. So we'll be working on finding sponsorships to help out. That's what we're working on. The ending of our meeting was just, you know, a recap. We will be meeting again on May 31st at 3:30 in the library. We're hoping to maybe have our communication specialists come in and help us out with some branding of it. And that'll be our next meeting. And then hopefully we'll go live after that. So after that, we would like to, once we have the awards up and running, work more on employee engagement and maybe coming up with some fun activities that we can do to get our staff just back together and having some good times together. Plus, you know, enjoy each other's company for once. That's it.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
Thanks, Kelly. Thanks for all the work on that too. To that
Oh, and
committee.
I would put a lot of that work back on Rachel and Angie. They've been doing a great job helping us out.
Well, good. I'm glad that we've got stuff going there.
Good stuff.
Yeah. All right, now we're coming to the public comment section of our agenda. I'm going to go ahead and read the rules here. The Board of Education has allotted 15 minutes for public comment. Each individual called upon can speak for 3 minutes. The board can vote to increase the 15-minute maximum if it wishes. A speaker sign-in sheet was available 15 minutes prior to the meeting for individuals that would like to speak. Sign-in closed when the meeting is called to order. The board president will call from the sign-in sheet after requested speakers have concluded, time permitting. The following are not permitted: the use of an individual staff member's name, comments that involve personalities, comments about the performance or conduct of individual staff members, comments about specific and/or confidential student-related issues. Individuals may request to have an item for discussion placed on the agenda. The request should be submitted in writing to the district clerk, Mrs. Irizarry, no later than noon on Wednesday prior to each meeting. I did have a couple of people sign up. Leo Walters Tahara is signed up first. Yep. I didn't have a topic here, but
Honestly, I was just trying to make it here after my last foil. I told Dr. Gielen I foiled faster than I've ever foiled before. It's a skill, really. I'm also giving it everything I have in the tank, so. Hello, board members and Olean community. I stand before you as a person who has on multiple occasions been verbally and physically assaulted by ultra-conservative individuals in our community, some of whom are in this room. I have been physically and verbally assaulted and been the victim of hate crimes, plural. So have my children. I also stand before you as someone who has just seen people elected who come from some of these communities. While they themselves might not perpetuate the act, I would love to know what they and their communities have done to prevent hate crimes and what our school is doing to prevent hate crimes and the culture that breeds them. Religious fundamentalism, conservatism, and far-right ideology in this nation have melded into a singular movement, publicly stating on an intent to take over our systems, to infiltrate their ideology, to control children, and to silence the voices of marginalized people. In our community, we are experiencing extremist beliefs that emphatically demean and do not recognize the autonomy of women, children, Black people, Muslims, poor people, LGBTQ people, and disabled people. These people have been public targets of local vitriolic religious leaders from these ultra-conservative communities. We have failed to protect our students from these ideologies, an ideology that has consistently been the breeding ground for domestic terrorism. As a matter of fact, the breeding ground for domestic terrorism that happened in Buffalo this week. White supremacy ideology has its roots in alt-right conservatism. This is not a commentary on a person, but rather an ideology. If your school or organization sends condolences for the Buffalo shooting victims' families, but does not teach about the evils of white supremacy and systemic racism, it is lip service. This school is then complicit in the culture that creates hate crimes, and no amount of thought and prayers can change that. Only acknowledgement and intentional anti-racist practice will change that fact. We have seen these messages posted that deny the very tangible effects of racism. Regardless of intention, the message that racism cells don't buy in is a signal that we're not listening to the voices of the marginalized, not a call for unity. While intentions may vary, we have members that have stated a desire to cut off the school system from state legislature because we don't believe in the protections that the state is trying to provide marginalized people. We have had Muslim students, queer students, and female students stand at this very mic and tell very real stories of violence that they had suffered in our halls. But instead of acting to protect our diverse students, we have created tepid responses and half-hearted actions. We have allowed in our halls religious leaders that are comfortable publicly maligning diverse individuals, and as a matter of fact, have verbally assaulted people during school board meetings, on public social media, and on the school premises. I genuinely want to give our new board members the benefit of the doubt, because diversity is what makes us great. But I struggle to do this as we have people who are publicly aligned with dangerous religious leaders who aggressively attempt to infiltrate the schools and deny the existence of hate speech, going so far to say that hate speech is an agenda instead of a tangible reality that ends the lives of diverse peoples regularly. At the end of the day, there is no common ground when people believe that identity is a political tactic. That is the work of harmful ideology and theology that has infiltrated the public sphere and continues to rob the freedom and autonomy of the diverse people in our community, despite the fact that religion has zero place in public policy. The beauty of Olean and Olean School District is that we are a diverse community, the most diverse in our area. We all come from different belief systems, and we need a board that is beholden to represent all students, not just straight white male Christians. And we are here, and we've been vocal, and will be more vocal. But I'm asking you as a school board to ensure that it takes all the Huskies to pull the sled, and that we teach all the Huskies that every one of those Huskies matter, despite the voice of religious leaders in our community who are actively denying that hate speech exists, and they're actively perpetuating the ground in which this is bred. Thank you.
Tim Sherlock, you're up next. All right.
There's only one of two, it's 50-50. Good evening. So I come before you, I did look at the agenda, and I have done a call for action to the board only but a couple times. I reread that gender policy that's on there. What are you thinking? We had a great policy, and now tonight, a page and a half, you redacted every piece of protection out of it. It is so vaguely written that you have left the interpretation out there that gives the ability to malign students. All I can think is that you cowered because the community said, whoa, I don't want a biological boy in the bathroom with my daughter. So you threw the baby out with the dishwater, and you got rid of every protection that that policy offered. You said, let's send it to DEI. I heard the comments. They voiced concerns. Send it for recommendation. That didn't happen. Shame on operations. That is garbage. We need a board that has a backbone, that is not afraid to stand up and say, maybe I don't agree with our bylaws. Maybe I don't agree that I can't speak. Maybe I need to have a conversation, because what we see every night, given maybe 5 times, is all of you, I second that, approved. Any discussion? That's what I hear. Shame on each and every one of you for not having discussion. Nothing will move forward if nothing is discussed. No idea will ever come to fruition or grow if you don't ask questions. And quite frankly, I am tired of being the only person in this district who vocalizes concern or asks questions. And when I do ask questions, I don't get answers. I wait for the next board meeting to see what you've done. The minutes from your subcommittees tell me nothing. I don't know what was discussed. I don't know who said what. I looked at the operations meeting minutes. All of those meetings should be public on the YouTube page so we can be informed. We talk about transparency. You talk about the best interests of the children. I looked at the sexual harassment policy. It still affords greater protection to the harasser and the aggressor. We have a board coming up now that openly disparages and says, no transgender, no LGBTQ. I expect more from a board.
Thank you. All right. Now we're moving on to the committee reports. We have the operations committee was on May 9th. Any discussion on that? Okay, then for the board report, I just have that the board met with superintendent candidates last week. We did a first round of interviews, and we feel pretty good about our pool of candidates. And we are conducting a second round of interviews next week. So hopefully we can announce a candidate soon. And now on to the superintendent's report.
Mr. Martell, do you want to go ahead and get that up there? Because I will be speaking to that. In the meantime, and while we're getting ready for it, there were a few things that happened very recently. One is, it's kind of an announcement, but of course, this is the time of the year where we're talking about final exam schedules, and they're putting final exam schedules together. This is more of what you might call a regular year, but the results will not be used for APPR. APPR, the Annual Professional Performance Review. We did receive very recently something from the state, and just clarification on it today about how we do not have to use any of the exams for the APPR results for teachers and principals. And the student performance category, which is half of the calculus that goes together for one of those evaluations, will not be reported to the state. But if any of our students hear that, that doesn't have anything to do with them. We still have final exams, and please come and take your final exams. They still count for students. It's very important that that message doesn't get mixed up somewhere in there. The other thing is, and I'll be touching on it a little bit here, but when you hear about RTI, which is response to intervention, we've had a lot of meetings lately when we've been discussing what that will look like and moving it forward in our district next year. It's one place that we've been working on this year, but it needs a whole lot more help. What we're going to find in the findings up here, in which we already knew anyway, is there are all kinds of ideas and different people who work for us throughout the district on what RTI really is. And until we can utilize it very, very well, we won't get the kinds of results that we want to see in student achievement, and also have a more efficient way when it comes to identifying our students for special education services and programs. So RTI, that's response to intervention. You're going to hear a whole lot more about it. And then when you ask, well, who's an RTI teacher? My answer to that is every teacher is an RTI teacher. And that's something that we'll be discussing more and explaining more, because I don't know if all of our teachers understand what that really means. And we'll have professional development and support on what that really does mean and how those tiers of interventions happen in every classroom throughout the district. So we'll be doing more of that. And there is a grant that we're very happy to find out that there's a real good chance we're a part of. And I say there's a good chance because we're basically approved from the state, and we learned we were approved for this grant, but we don't know if we're in this year's cohort or next year's cohort. So we're approved sometime. Whenever it is, we'll be ready, because we know this is also a grant to help us move forward the work that we know needs to get done. So what I wanted to share with everyone this evening is, well, we got past that part. Next slide, please. We had 3 studies performed by the Futures group in 21-22, and those 3 were the school transportation efficiency study, the school-based health services, municipal Medicaid, and an educational service analysis really looking at special education. These 3 people, John McGuire, Richard Labrie, and Michael Neiman of Futures, they will be here at our next meeting to present. What I wanted to do, and I know you all had copies of their finalized report that we did receive, but I wanted to just go through some of those findings, highlight some of those findings, some of those recommendations, and that can also help us think about if there's anything in particular we would like them to expand on more, or that we would like them to make sure that they focus on. We'll have a better idea of that. So on the next page, please. The transportation efficiency study, this came back with a whole lot of commendations. There were a lot of things that they looked at, and they looked at very carefully, that they say that we're doing very, very well. So my congratulations also to Jenny Bellotta, who oversees our transportation program. But I think it also goes back, and Jenny, you're doing a great job with it. But just the fact that we've been doing our combination of getting together with Portville and Hinsdale, it's made a big difference, I think, in our efficiencies. We do, 2 Ps and drop, sorry. We do permit early drop-off to accommodate participation in the school breakfast program. Not everyone does that. We have some students who are here up to 50 minutes before school starts. To that end, I do want to put something out there just to get on everybody's radar screen. Our principals are looking at that might be too much time. And with too much time, especially when we know how quickly students can eat breakfast, then you have a lot of time that almost becomes wasted time and can be difficult time when kids need to be supervised. And of course, we have a number of people. We have 11 people right here who are supervising every morning. We're looking to perhaps starting the school day earlier because the kids are already here. And not necessarily, this does not mean changing our transportation. So the buses would still be running as the buses are running for the most part with a few different changes. But as you have every year with bus runs and loads. But we're looking to start our school a little bit earlier. You'll hear more about that as they work through those details. The cost-effective standards, 5% or less of the total budget. Here it's 2.65 approximately. That tells you right away that we have a very cost-effective program. And they commended us for maintaining a cost-effective program itself. They did have a recommendation about routing software. And I wanted to report to you that we've already purchased it, initiated it. We had some training, and it'll be fully implemented in the upcoming school year. They did recommend to us that we have a written agreement with both Hinsdale and Portville that would include a 1-year notification. Everything is going really great, but what if someone wants out? So that was one of the recommendations they had. And they did also commend us on our staffing. They referred to it as adequate, but adequate's not a bad thing. They also said we handled the driver shortage that a lot of other school districts had difficulty with. We've been doing it very well. Next slide, please. They commended us on our capital reserve fund for our fleet and our regular bus fleet turnover. That did result in lower maintenance fees. They also commended us on maintaining coverage for insured and uninsured drivers, as well as a relatively high actual ridership ratios. And the actual ridership is you have a group of kiddos who would be assigned to a bus, right? And then you have the students who actually ride. We have a very good handle on how many students actually ride. So therefore our percentage, I believe it was up around 80%, which is very high. Before I go on, any questions or issues with the transportation? And one of my recommendations with the allotted time that we'll have with them is to maybe minimize the amount of time on transportation. The recommendations they made, we already have enacted, and maybe we can just briefly touch on it in our time with them.
Karen, could you elaborate on the new starting times, which schools, how much sooner, that kind of stuff, or don't you have that information yet?
Well, I hesitate to put it out there because they're still working on it, but we're not looking at a big difference. It'll be somewhere in around the 20-minute range. And we were looking at a change in all schools, but that's not written in stone. So let's wait until we have our definite answer.
Would they also be letting out early then?
Yes, it would be the same amount of time, just shifted on the clock. So we're not there yet. So I'm not reporting that that's what we're doing, but it is one of the things we're looking at. So
That's a huge shift.
On the next one, we have school-based health services, the municipal Medicaid. And this is one place where I do believe that we need more time with them for explanations on some of the findings that they had. The recommendation to cross-reference the free and reduced lunch and Medicaid. One thing I wanted to point out that's not as applicable now because we're not doing the same free and reduced ways of figuring out students because now everyone is eligible for the free lunch. But it doesn't mean that we shouldn't have something in place for how we're going to cross-reference those lists as they asked us to do once that goes away. Do we know yet, Jenny, when that's going away? I don't mean to put you on the spot.
For the
Community.
eligibility, so we have 3 more years in our contract right now.
Thank you. So that gives us some time for it. One finding is that our Medicaid claims approval of 93% is relatively high. That's good. What that means is the things that we send in to be reimbursed, that what they're reimbursing, it's good. But then we also look at 93% and say, okay, what's happening with the other 7%? So they outlined for us what are some of the things that rejected, the other ones that were rejected. And they were things like some signatures missing and there was not an apparent approval with something, or you didn't have the physician sign off on it. But those are all things that when that's brought to our attention now, when we know what to look for, we can bring that 93%, which is already high, but make that even higher. The recommendation is that we may want to transfer some positions from IDEA to the general fund for Medicaid billing purposes. What they meant by that is if we have students who are in employees who are in our IDEA grant, that if they're providing services to someone and that child is Medicaid eligible for that service, we cannot bill back to Medicaid. So that's just making sure that we're utilizing very good, strong communication between the business office and also our special education office. Again, being aware of that and knowing that from year to year, we can be very cognizant of those percentages of people who are in the general fund or in IDEA that can make a difference. So another notice of finding we had here is the district is not receiving Medicaid reimbursement for all the Medicaid eligible services being provided to all Medicaid eligible students. And that's one of the ones that we want to get some more clarification on, because when asking the special education department about it, their notion was that we were. So we want to know a little bit more about what did you find and what are your more specific recommendations that we can increase this.
They found that we were billing about 10%. I mean, their findings were that we're missing millions of dollars potentially.
Yes, I think it was around $1.5 million. Right.
Not billed.
That wasn't billed. So we want to know a little bit more about it, because as we're asking, we have to know.
What is going on.
Absolutely.
Clearly.
Then one of the findings with Olean General Hospital is with our occupational therapy and physical therapy services. They're saying that we have generous staffing and some sessions are short in duration for the Medicaid billing purposes. That if you have a service that's only 10 minutes in duration, you can't bill back for it.
I just,
And we should know that,
well,
correct?
this is one of the.
I mean,
things
this
that,
didn't just come about, did it? I mean,
every single year that contract has come up, everybody on the board would be aware, I have objected to that contract. And I have said, it's 20 years old, and this is a contract with the hospital about the PT and OT services. We need to sit down with the hospital and have inconsistent provisions on Medicaid billing. It says both the hospital should bill and the school should bill. And we never did it.
and we were told every year, this is a contract that we approve every year. Stop asking questions about it, because this is a contract that we approve every year. It's approved every year. It's the same contract, approved every year. How could it be any different? It's approved every year. Were we not told that?
Oh, I mean, I feel like, Tim gets up here and says
I know,
that we're
and
told that
I
we should,
know.
that
You have
that
no
we
idea.
sit here. But when we try to say something
Yeah.
and we try to actually move something forward, you're verbally abused. I mean, that's what happened to me. I was just attacked, called pets, told I didn't belong on the board.
Stay in your lane.
And
Don't
then we find out
overreach.
that nobody was billing them.
No, nobody was doing it. To the
No.
tune of.
Well, I think in my
again,
experience-
$1.5 million
A year.
lost that we did not, incredible to me that could even have happened.
I am very happy to say that in my
We're getting
experience
something
with the board since January, now albeit it's only been since January, that does not characterize it. And we have been asking questions, and that's part of what we're getting from this here. There are more questions, of course, whenever you get any kind of a service or a study done like this, it'll raise a lot of questions, but that's good. Then we know exactly what questions to ask, and we know especially some areas that we have to pay some very close attention to, because as you've noted, there's a lot of money to it. The other thing with the OTPT services, they did talk, when they're talking about the generous staffing, they're also talking about it's not necessarily the number of students and the students who are identified, but it's how those students are served. service. For example, the difference between having those services in groups or having those services individually. And I know that there have been, look, COVID was difficult to everything, and we had made some changes according to COVID. But I can report to you that since this was brought to our attention, we already have been having many changes, and you've been seeing them too, in CSE meetings where we're going from individual to group settings. And that's happening more and more. So we're already getting to a more efficient, but also more reasonable. Because some of these services also, it's not just that you have more children together. Sometimes, and in some services, having more together, and we've seen that happen in speech, that it can be beneficial to the students who are involved, that one-on-one isn't always better, that there's also, depending on the services and needs, which gets into something else they talk about, which is really getting to know the students and the students' needs very, very well, being able to articulate what those needs are so we can very properly match the services to the students'
They talk
individual
about
needs.
Establishing a point person.
If I can, I'm really disturbed that we apparently left some significant money on the table. In years past, we, as a district, employed, I'll call it a credit agency that would help the district prepare these bills for the government and collect the Medicaid and stuff like that, because the district didn't really do it then. And we did away with that because we were assured that we could internalize that process and get it done. And it's just disturbing that it ain't.
Well, we do have a service that helps us, but they help us with the things that we provide them. So part of it is also, as I understand it, it's making sure that there is also an oversight between what we should have scheduled according to IEPs, the services that we should be providing, and then the services that we're submitting to Medicaid. So it's really good to have a 93% rating of everything you're submitting to Medicaid, but you want to make sure you're submitting everything you can submit, right, to get reimbursed.
That 93%, that is great, but 93% of what we're submitting, I mean, we should have submitted a whole lot more.
Yeah, so that makes sense to everyone, correct? Okay, good. Because part of this is also making sense of the findings. So we do have a dedicated person to Medicaid billing now. It was one of the things they talked about.
So we do have.
We do
somebody now?
have one staff member we have hired since then. We've done the training. The training has been provided. And then we're always looking for ongoing training. So it's not just one person, so that, and I was talking about this with our director, with Marcy, about it. And it's training for her and the person doing it, and also the backup training, because in all of our offices, we want to have those redundancies for times when people are sick. I mean, we're a people business. Things happen to people.
I got just a one question.
Mhm.
For the 1.5, wouldn't that be something our internal and external auditors would have caught?
No, because they look at what's been submitted. Again, if you're not submitting everything, then they wouldn't know what's not submitted.
Shocked? Are you kind of shocked?
Well, yeah.
Really are.
Good,
yeah.
You're not.
We're all
I
shocked.
remember months ago, I think we talked about the CPSE and CSE reports that we get in our board minutes.
Mhm.
We asked if there would be something we could get that would
Which tell us
have more
nothing.
detail, because there's not really any
There's none.
form of
Zero.
detail in them. I mean, there's really nothing when we're approving them to be looking at. Is that still possible? I mean, I know, I thought you said that there were other reports we could maybe get our hands on. I mean, that was a while back, but.
But not that long ago.
Yeah, the job of oversight is very difficult.
I
With,
mean, I'm just wondering if there's something we could see more
With
regularly about, like,
nothing. Yeah.
these minutes have been billed for, or.
Oh,
I don't
oh,
know,
no.
If there's anything, any sort of more detail than. what
Yeah,
we-
it
because
wouldn't
there's really
be-
No detail.
Okay, now I understand what you're saying. No,
Not that.
that wouldn't show up in the CSE minutes or the CPSE minutes. What that will show is basically what it does show, is those services that we're providing, not what happened last week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and if they were having those services those 3 times a week.
So would this be like a priority
Still
for our
get
internal and external
more
auditors to
information.
focus on that since we're
No, it's more of a priority for the special education department. And the accounting for the hours scheduled and the hours billed was something that I had discussed also with the director. So she can have some of those things in place too, that, and she's aware of that, of getting, especially from our outside folks, but also internally, that we know how many we're supposed to have in sessions we're supposed to hold, how many sessions were held. And then it's also going back and making sure we make up the sessions that need to be made up. She also pointed out something that's kind of challenging, is if you have say, the 2 of us are in a group session and I'm absent, then we can't bill for the group session, even for the other person who's there. So we're looking into and just in brainstorming of like, okay, if that student's at home, maybe they could attend remotely and we'll still be able to hold the session if it's convenient to the family and depending on the circumstances of not being in school. So we're looking at some of those other situations where we can make a difference and maximize, first of all, the services for kids, but then that we're also getting reimbursed for the services we are providing.
okay, that's good for the hearing now, but is there any way we're gonna get reimbursed any of that 1.5?
Yes. So we have already gone back to some of those other sessions that at the time that this finding, the research was done, when the study was being performed, I guess, that some things had not been submitted yet, and they have been submitted. Anything that could be submitted has been submitted for this year.
What's the timetable for submission?
You know, it depends, but you can go back years on some of them, up to, is it 2 years? 2 years.
Do we have an estimate though of how much we're probably not going to ever recover?
Right, how many years do we go
I mean,
back
how much are we getting, or
and
how much are we
missing
out?
1.5 a year for how many years?
Well, that I don't know. Of course, we've been spending the most amount of time now on the what can we recoup, rather than calculating what can't we recoup. Could we do that kind of, yep, at some point, but honestly, lately, we have been focusing on what can we recoup.
Right,
So what have we recouped then?
Additionally, after the first report that I got back, there was another $660 something thousand that we recouped since then. What I can do though, and I'd like to have those numbers at hand when they come in on the 7th, is Jenny, maybe we can get an updated Medicaid report on not only this year, because I know a lot was done on things from this year, but also the ones that we went back
So
over the
how
last
many
2 years
do
to
we have
submit.
Go back for this report to figure out how much we're out.
It-
total.
Medicaid began to reimburse schools for most special ed services in 2013.
13, okay. So how many, do we want to know this information? Cool. I mean,
Put
mean,
the blinders on?
why
So
wouldn't you want to know?
no, I'm just saying, I mean, how far back do we want to go? You don't want to go back so far before it becomes.
So Dr. Gillen, clearly, I hope you realize that we are now holding you responsible for any of this, but I just
Sure.
want to say that we have been asking, I asked from the moment I got on the board to have an audit of the special education department.
Yes, for sure.
So
Mhm.
5 years.
That's 6 years.
Five or 6 years it's taken. And I know that people out there think, what are you people doing on that board? And I'm here to say that it's not easy to get, this report was finished in about December. He was done doing whatever he was doing, talking to everybody and all this good stuff. And every month since January, we have asked, what were those results? What were those results? What were those results?
And we've missed an
And
entire
we've missed
budget.
an entire half a year. Now, again, I'm not blaming you. This is not your fault. I might have something to say to Mr. McGuire when he gets here on, June 7th. But I mean, it's just really frustrating as a board member to be asking for things and just never getting what we're looking for. So, I mean, it's really disappointing to me that our district left that kind of money on the table and did not get it billed
Well,
correctly.
you're expressing two
I'm
frustrations. So I think, Mary, one is the frustration of stonewalling and obfuscation that has happened since 2013.
Yep.
And then when we finally did get something going, some kind of audit, then it was delayed for years or for months before we finally even saw a draft.
Yep.
So,
So-
again, we're not blaming
Yeah.
So there's the,
current
there's the
administration.
frustrations. That's what the frustrations are. But in the end, we need to look forward as to how we want to manage this. So as far as reports from the special ed department, we get the CSE and CPSE reports that are numbers. They don't tell us anything, but we have to approve them anyway.
No, they don't tell us.
And that's fine. That's great.
Well, there actually
But-
is more information we could.
There
get
is.
that would be
I
helpful.
feel there is.
But I would
that
like
we
to see
could
some
get
billing information.
more than
What we're eligible to
bunch of
bill,
numbers and-
what's been billed, what's come back, what's been paid. Let's keep a monthly update on our percentages instead of.
Sounds like a task for the finance committee.
That's what I'm the finance committee.
Well, I think that's a good recommendation to send over to them because it's also important to know what it is that would be helpful in looking at on an ongoing basis. I do agree that we need to be talking about those mitigation measures, but I want to let you know this. So when they were done with their interviews, and there were 3 different studies. The transportation study we received a little bit earlier as in a draft form, and I believe that was towards the end of February. Then it was when we received the first draft of the other ones, before we could move anywhere, or before we waited for a finalized version, we started tearing it apart. And that's why you'll see that some of these things we've already started doing. Because when you get this kind of information, you don't want to wait for a report to come out because you know something. So we started acting on it right away. And in fact, from what I understand, there was a question raised even in some of the interviews. So when I first got here, we were already looking in, the district was already looking into, I hadn't looked into anything at that point, but we were already looking into some of the Medicaid billing and going back to what was earlier in the year. And so that was already starting to happen. I don't want anyone to get the thought that we wait until the finalized version. It was frustrating. I don't know if it's a function of having 3 of them going at once or other districts and us working with the same folks. I don't know. I think what they ended up finding though, in the end product, it isn't a bad product. There's an awful lot here for us to work with. And that's the purpose of having outside eyes come in and look at any kind of program that we have.
Absolutely.
So going back to the fix, so we do have a dedicated person now on this. How we didn't hire a new position. I mean, I don't remember approving a new position to pay Medicaid. So did we reassign somebody?
It was our
else?
dedication of our clerical staff in the special education office. We still have one position that's open that we've been trying to hire a keyboard specialist for the special education department, but it was making sure we had one person who was dedicated. So it's not an afterthought when I'm done with my work, I'll spend a little time on Medicaid. It's my job is to work on Medicaid and working on that Medicaid billing and also getting that additional training for the staff down there.
I had a question on the sessions that were short in duration. I mean, we have an idea of how much money has been left on the table for unsubmitted reimbursement for previous years, but do we have any idea how much money we're missing out from not being reimbursed for these sessions, which are too short?
We can't bill for them because they're too short.
No, No, not knowing exactly how many. I did, the findings in the report wasn't given to us in that fashion, so I don't know exactly how many of them. But just knowing if there was even one, that, it's a scheduling thing. And if you go back, no, it's on the next one. On the next study, we hear that one of our problems is communication between general education and special education. Well, part of this is also making sure that those who do the scheduling, that our principals or whoever's in charge of scheduling in one of our buildings understands the need, that it's not about, well, I just need to get to see these kids today, and if I only get to see them for 5 minutes, that's a good thing. No, you're actually better off seeing a few of them for the amount of time that you need, and then reschedule for full sessions with the other students, not only for the services that they get, but also, again, for the Medicaid billing, because it's important for the students and also for the finances of the district.
Well, that's like one of the number one things that he recommends is that we develop a comprehensive plan for the achievement of a pervasive culture of ownership.
Oh, that's in
for
the next
students
one, though.
with disabilities, right? I mean, so we
Yep.
all have ownership of those students. I know you're getting to that.
Can we go to the next slide, please?
I jumped ahead.
No, that was a good preview of what's to come. So another recommendation is that our Medicaid eligibility determination be part of the intake process for special education. And I, again, have discussed this with Marcy Johnson, and we are doing that. And that all parents sign the parental authorization for Medicaid, just with all of that paperwork, just to get the signature, so the signature isn't something that's lacking. A recommendation also to identify a point person, which we have. That is not Marcy John, it's Marcy Johnson. Your interim superintendent is not a very good typist, I'll tell you that right now. In the district, she is our person, and Jen Shire through BOCES is the person that she works with. But we do have that one point person. If there are any questions, it is to go to Marcy. She is overseeing all of this. It is her responsibility for the billing, for the oversight, for the scheduling, for the ensuring the staffing, all of it. So
Whose responsibility was that for all of that before?
it would have been Marcy Johnson.
Okay, thank you.
So again, one of the things that we should be asking for is an explanation of the calculations in their $1.5 million finding of approximate loss of Medicaid billing. That is, we need to know more about the specifics on it, along with any other questions that either as a result of our discussion tonight or your further review of the findings that you come up with. Okay, next one, please. So now that we're all prepared for this one, the last one is our education service analysis. Their findings, and I looked at mostly findings for this, that we have no comprehensive or pervasive culture of ownership for students with disabilities. That's disturbing, but there is this notion of those students.
Or they're my students.
Yeah, well,
Oh,
my
those are
students,
your
their
students.
students,
Those aren't my students.
instead of our students. And there is a division, and that's something that needs to be fixed. At the administrative levels, they found the relationship between general and special education is variable and poor. And I hear that from both sides, so of administration as well. So that is definitely a place where we need to improve. They also reported professional development for classroom aides is reported as an area of need. And that's not new. It's not specialized to Olean City School District, but it is something that we can do better. And we have talked about when our teachers are involved in professional learning. I'm trying to get away from professional development, retrain my brain. In our professional learning sessions, that our support aides, classroom aides should be there too, learning exactly what's the terminology, what are we learning in curriculum, what are we learning about DEI. We should all be together learning about it as one. And that our organizational structure of special education administration is logical and rational, and the process and procedures are reported as consistent. That's good, that's big. But we're lacking clearly articulated written eligibility and exit guidelines for the various instructional programs and related services. So I'm here to also report that a matrix has been developed this year to guide those discussions. They started doing that, I believe, in October at a professional learning day. And then I did witness and sat in on part of the day in January on our superintendent's conference day when they were working on that even more. And that's been used at CSE meetings. It's being shared throughout the district. That can be especially helpful for our general education teachers as well as our parents to understand what do we offer and what are our typical attributes of students who are in this program and what can we expect from a curriculum standpoint? What are those expected outcomes? So we're working right now on the overview of our types of programs. And in talking to Marcy, what she's looking forward to doing is now taking that and working to specialize it according to levels, to have an elementary level one, an intermediate middle school one, and then refine the high school one. So that has been started. We're working on getting that even refined.
Because that was one of the things they found, right?
That we did not
we
have.
a full
Correct.
continuum of services, especially at the elementary level. We, you know, the idea is least restrictive environment. I think we were
Yes.
just missing completely the boat on that.
Well, this will be very helpful, and I think it'll help make good decisions for students in their programming. And the other important part, and I'll say this again, is also those exits. Because, you know, we're also looking for what are those indicators to exit. Next page, please. We have a lean ratio for special education teachers. And you can look at that and say, wow, that's a great thing, but tuck that away for a minute. We have more of our students are in general education settings as compared to the county and state. Again, you might look at that and say, wow, that's a really good thing. But we have a generous staffing of paraprofessionals. Well, why would this be? One of the things we've been doing is, and you'll see that a whole bunch of, go down to where those numbers are, that third from the bottom. 1211 and 811 are the only high school programs provided in the district. We're not a district that, let's say, has a lot of co-teaching in the general
Consultant
education,
teachers.
right? So if you have co-teaching, we know that that's staff intensive. So if we had that, of course, our staffing would be higher and our paraprofessionals would be lower because now what we're doing is sending, as our students go out into the general education, we're sending an aid with kiddos. So we also need to review the criteria for speech, OT and PT, occupational therapy and physical therapy. We need to examine contracts and costs with OGH. I think we've discussed that for related service. And response to intervention is a subject of diverse perspectives, as they said it. Well, what that basically means is we all have a different idea of what it is. And we are working on that at the district level. We've had a lot of conversations with Jen Kleston, Jen Mahar, and Marcy Johnson, and how do we move this as a district, and how do we make this something that we all understand? The recommendation to have vertical articulation teams, that's really important as our students are moving and transitioning from one building to another throughout our district. And the other recommendation of communication plan for secondary programs is very, very important.
So if we have high school students with special needs and they are out in a regular education classroom, there is an aide that's out with them. Is that how it is? We have a paraprofessional. We don't do any
Oftentimes,
consultant
yes.
teaching or any of that, like no consultant teachers.
Oh, we have some consultant
Do we have any
teachers. Wait,
consultant
Marcy.
teachers at all?
Oh, yes. Yes, it's the consultant teachers we have. It's that integrated co-teaching. That's the model that you're not going to see.
I see. The high school's continuum is composed
Mm.
of resource room at grades 8 to 12, a consultant teacher in English at grade 8.
9.
Okay,
That
so
was a
grade
mistake.
8 here.
Yep. that-
Integrated this was the final one that came from May. Integrated co-teaching in mathematics and English at grade 8, 1511 at grade 8, 1211 at grades 9 through 12, and 811 at grades 8 to 12. that doesn't look to me like what we got, yeah, where are our teachers that can go out with those kids? Jenny, you know what I'm talking about, it's what we do in Bolivar. We don't have that, do we?
So part of that is looking at, in every school and school district has a different model. And
I get it.
And we also know that it changes with our needs, right? So one of the things we're looking at right now for students who may have been in a program that's basically similar to an alternative assessment program with a different outcome at the end of the high school is we're looking at 15-1-1 programs where you'll have a general education teacher and a special educator in the same room with the same outcomes, you teaching the same classes as a student who might be in a regents class down the hall. And the thought for that is to have the proper supports in place and to have the proper instructional strategies so that those students will be just as successful with the same curriculum in the high school. And that's something that has already been started and looking at increasing our 15-1 in our secondary school.
I just still can't, I'm still just trying to wrap my head around. So we have consultant teachers at all grades 4 through 7. And just what happens to those kids? Like, they only get a consultant teacher in English. You said it was grade 9, not even grade 8. I'm wondering, like, what happens to those kids that are they then put into a 15-1-1 classroom or an 8-1-1 class? What happens to those
Well,
kids that need that extra, help?
We have resource room and we have consultant teachers who are working with them, but not,
Resource room though is to work with them on their goals,
Right.
on their IEP. It's not to assist them in helping them to get passing those classes and hopefully graduating.
Right.
That's what I'm pointing out.
so it's, you did mention the graduation word. And we know that as we put these in place, we'll see better graduation outcomes for our students.
If I can jump in on that point, and that is, I think as this plan goes forward, we need specific benchmarks to judge, are we making progress? Because in all honesty, Karen, the picture that seems to be painted is we have a very big systemic mess that's going to take a heavy lift to repair. You mentioned the divisions, us, and these are our kids, and we've heard that before, even this evening. So it will require a lot of focus and energy to fix this. And I welcome the consultants and their input next month.
I thought, when I read this report, the problem is so much bigger than the Olean school district. Yeah, I think that we are trying to use special education for a purpose that it was not intended. It was intended to accommodate disabilities. And it's now being used as our primary mechanism for academic intervention. And in fact, as I read that report, 70% of kids who are receiving special ed services, who are classified, for special ed programs, their classification is just the hook to get them into special ed. That is, the kinds of disabilities that they are diagnosed with are these kind of plastic amorphous categories like other or learning disability. And I think they're being given a disability diagnosis so in order for them to get the academic intervention services, not vice versa. And then the academic intervention services don't work very well. I mean, it looks to me from reading this report that if you get referred to special ed in 3rd grade because you're not reading or doing math at grade level, that you have an almost 0% chance of reading or doing math at grade level in 8th grade, and only about a 50% chance of graduating from high school.
And we're providing, I don't know what we're doing in the elementary. We get them to the middle school. Looks like we're doing a pretty decent job over there at OINS in our programs and what we're doing. And I can see that, that makes sense. But then we're getting them up here. My God, like throwing them to the wolves, or we're bringing them back to a less restrictive environment. It just, the whole thing just doesn't make any sense to me. I would think that consistency would be something that we would want. And clearly whatever we're doing is not working. I mean, I can't say.
Well,
anything
and
else.
that's the recommendation of the vertical articulation. And you're right, that there's a sense as you're going through. But Janine, you hit on it exactly. And when we are using a very strong pyramid of interventions and a response to intervention in everything that we do, then there's less of a chance that someone, because they're not learning or because they haven't made the grade at some point, will automatically just end up with an IEP. And what we also have to fight is there's a little bit of a notion out there that that's what RTI is for, that RTI is meant to be the pathway to special education. And that's not at all what it is.
That's exactly what the report says. It's procedure owned by general educators as a general education initiative, and then many viewed it only as a necessary path-through to special education. Referral.
Right. And I think, look, I'm not going to say I have all the answers, but what I've noticed is it could be that if you're going through the process of determining whether or not a student is going to be identified for special education services, one of the questions would be, so what have you already tried? What are those interventions? So that would make one, if they want to jump to a conclusion that, well, then RTI means this is what you have to do to go to special ed, but it's not. And the response to intervention would be, you have a tier of instructional strategies that you use in your classroom, even if you're teaching geometry to a bunch of 10th graders, that you use for the bulk of the students in the class. But then for some of the students, you have to use some other strategies because they have a greater need. And then you have maybe another tier where you have other kinds of services, maybe through special education services or another professional who's working with you to help them get that material. But see, that's the key. All the students are all of our students. And how do we get everyone to that endpoint and get everyone successful with the same curriculum? And that's what we're working towards. And there have been great gains. We have groups that in each, and I think you saw that in the report too, in each of our buildings that are meeting and looking at data. We have point people who are helping to make that happen, but also providing the professional learning so that every teacher and every educator working with students will get better and better at reading the data and knowing what data we need to look at to make those decisions. So is there another slide or is that it? That's it. Thank you. So any other specific questions or things that you would like to get answers to in preparation for it that we can shoot off to them before they come and talk to us on the 7th, please just let me know. Now I'll send it off. But your other recommendations that you've made so far, and I'll make sure that we follow up on that with the finance committee and also with our leaders and talking about those plans and a benchmark to measure as well.
Timeline for a benchmark, I think, for benchmarks as well, because we need to be on it.
Longest report I've done for you yet, but
Yeah.
it's all good
Yeah.
stuff. Thank you, sir.
Pretty involved. All right, we're gonna move on to the consent agenda. Can I get a motion for that?
So moved.
Thank you, Mary.
Sure.
Thank you, Jim. Any discussion? It's got all our reports from the internal auditors, treasurer's report, transfers report, CSE recommendations, CPSE recommendations, and the
The
substitute.
substitute list.
Yep.
That's good.
Yes.
Any discussion on that? All those in favor?
I
Opposed? Abstentions? Now we come to the big event, the certification of the budget vote. Can I get a motion for that?
Sure.
Thank you, Jim.
Second,
All right, thanks, Ira.
you're welcome.
Any discussion?
Our community for having the faith and confidence in our district.
I'd just like to ask Vicky, this seems like a very large vote compared to votes that we've had in the past, both for the board members and for the basic budget. By my calculations, we have over 850 votes, which is a large number.
I see total number 911.
911. Okay, yeah. What is the normal?
It varies, Paul. I've compiled a report since 1997. It depends what the propositions are and how many seats are available and how many candidates are running.
So last year, I think we were, I don't know, over 600, 680 or.
589.
What, last year was?
Yep,
90?
so I have this in front of me.
589.
Of course, the year before, when it was all the mail-in, that was the highest at 1630. Before that was 350, 261, 305, 450, 550, 384, 661, and 915. So that leads me to believe that there was a time in 12, 13, 13, 14 where we had similar numbers, higher numbers. And then we dropped significantly for a while.
No, there you go.
All right, any other discussion?
I should probably recuse myself from this vote because since I'm on the list of people to be approved, I think probably
That
it's
seems-
appropriate
seems
that I not
appropriate. Yeah. All right,
vote.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And Paul is abstaining. Congratulations to the newly elected board members, Dan Farnham and Lee Filbert, and Paul returning for a little bit longer.
Just like to say that with this number of votes and me winning by one, says a lot for the democratic process, and every vote does count.
Might I also recognize that Mr. Farnham and Mr. Filbert are in the audience, so gentlemen, congratulations. And we'll be reaching out very soon for your board orientation, right?
Yes. All right, on to the next. We have a school volunteer. Tracy Padlow is going to volunteer for us. Can I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Janine. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
Yeah.
Thank you, Jim. We have a decrease of teacher aide position hours. Can I get a motion for that?
So moved.
Thank you, Janine.
Second.
Thank you, Jim. Any discussion?
What's the need for the decrease in hours?
We have Shirley Russell is retiring. And whenever there's a resignation or a retirement, we take a look at that position, first of all, to determine whether we need to replace the position or not. And looking at this position and the consideration of it, the position has been, she was a full-time person, so it had been utilized in such a way that we filled her schedule. So her replacement does not need to have the schedule just filled to be full-time. So there isn't a need for a full-time teacher aide position there. And when I say there, that's over at Eastview. So then what I do is in conversations with Mr. Wolf and also with our principals and also our supervisors, and I also ask over at special education, there was a need for a full-time aide elsewhere. So if the assignment would change, but the position would still be a full-time position elsewhere. And there was not need in the district anywhere else for that full-time position. So we do need it as a part-time position. We're maintaining the position of part-time, but a reduction in hours to the 5.75 hours.
When we discussed this in the executive committee, I thought we had agreed to look at the total number of full-time versus part-time aide positions. And I don't see that information. Do we have?
That was
or-
emailed out.
Yes, she sent it.
With, oh, okay. Yeah, I'm sorry, I missed it with, just refresh my memory here.
On the number of full-time positions in the entire unit or
Yes.
teacher aide positions? We have,
Teacher aide positions specifically.
okay, off the top of my head, and this is not easy for an interim. We do have we still have a full-time position, at least one, maybe it's only one over at Eastview, but we have full-time teacher aide positions in other buildings. And I believe in special education, we have some special teacher aides that are full-time as well. Altogether, I believe there were 8. Oh, we both thought it was the same number. It's somewhere in the vicinity of 8 full-time positions.
8 full-time positions out of how many?
A lot.
Yeah. I can't support this motion as it's written, or for reasons that I've stated before many times to this board in the past, that I think we're moving in the wrong direction with teacher aide positions, going from full-time, reducing the number of full-time positions, part-time. You know, we can change the title, we can move people laterally to a different full-time position, but what this amounts to is the loss of a full-time position. And I can't support that, because we had an understanding, I felt at one time, that we were moving towards more rather than fewer full-time teacher aide positions. Since these positions are so hard to retain people, we have a revolving door almost every month of new hires and people who have resigned. And there are few incentives for keeping people in these positions. So.
And I think we definitely understand what you're saying to us is that, you know, we just don't have a need for a full-time aide. But, you know, I. argue
Well,
the
I don't,
point-
I
Okay,
don't,
listen, you let me say.
okay, sorry.
So I argue that, you know, we obviously had somebody in this full-time position, and we were obviously keeping that person busy. Yes. So it is hard for me to even agree that, you know, cheaper, we just all of a sudden now we got to drop somebody down to a part-time position. It's just.
These aid jobs that we're considering full-time, anything full-time is considered 6 hours? or more?
6 hours, yes. And the reason for 5.75 hours, I think, goes back historically to a previous superintendent, perhaps almost 20 years ago, who saw this as a way to save money by reducing the hours of the people who would probably least likely to stand up for themselves.
Yeah, I mean, it just seems like 15 minutes. I mean, in this
Right,
position-
15 minutes.
This position.
I mean, we're going from.
specifically,
The benefits.
you know,
Right, I understand the benefits are the issue, but the benefits are the issue
I know, both ways.
both ways.
I agree, but it's not that it's 15 minutes.
No, we get it,
No.
we know.
I'm just-
Right.
Karen, do you know if the person in question would agree to remain at 6.5 hours?
The person in question is retiring. So
Okay,
I don't know if 12 hours would be enough to make her want to stay after I spoke to her the other day.
so there's no affected party to consult with before deciding this?
Yeah, no, it's,
Okay,
this is just something that we do. We reevaluate and, we've also looked at, when you talk about the number of aides we have, we saw that in that last report. We have a lot of paraprofessionals in this district. We are probably overstaffed. So one of the things we look at when we're trying to be fiscally responsible to our taxpayers as well is to make sure that we're staffed correctly. And it's not just something we do with teacher aides. We do it with every teaching position, every administrative position, every cleaner. We'll look and see, is this position still required as we move forward? What we were not going to do is to decrease from full-time to part-time for someone who is a valued employee who's been working for us. So yes, we found something for her to do.
And we
Yeah.
understand that, definitely.
And what she was doing might also got us in a little bit of trouble if it was in work from another unit. So to say that we'd have someone do the same thing might not be a good thing.
So,
Tutoring.
but admittedly, we are, every district, I believe, is struggling for substitutes and that kind of stuff. I mean, Kelly and I were just, is there like no way that we could, utilize this person to help fill in those kind of situations? I mean, we are coming off of a pandemic. We're coming off of a time where kids are, needing, I think, more and more assistance, not less and less. So I kind of have to agree as I look at the list that we are high in our teacher aide, positions. But in this particular situation, is there not, I mean, you said you checked everything, but.
Okay, so what we do though, and I don't want people to misunderstand this, we have been, and I have to thank all of our teacher aides, they have stepped up in a huge way to be substitute teachers when we haven't had teachers. And then they do work that full time, and there's a differential in their contract that they are then paid for the time that they're working in another job. And, and that's also to the detriment to the job we've hired them for. And then they'll often make sure that those responsibilities are taken care of. Our folks have been stepping up, but they're also very tired. And they've also mentioned that they wanted more subs. That's why I made the comment I did about getting more subs in here. That's a very positive thing. So they do that.
The perception, I believe, among a lot of teacher aides is that they already work more than 5.75 hours, and they're giving back a certain number of free hours to the district already. I don't see any decrease in a full-time, any full-time teacher aide position as being incentive to maintain for those people to keep the jobs that they already have. Hence the revolving door of teacher aides that we have in this district. I think if we were to compare this district with districts of similar size where they have full-time teacher aides, we would see much less attrition, much less of the revolving door effect. And I simply can't support any reduction in full-time teacher aide positions when I feel that we already don't have enough. Since we have many people in this unit who are single mothers, single parents who are trying to struggle on one minimum wage salary, and then with the most the beneficial benefit that they have not available to them. So I just can't do it.
With that, I'm gonna call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed?
Aye.
No,
No,
So Mary, that's a no.
That's no.
Paul, that's a no.
yes. that's a
Julio?
no.
That's a no.
And Ira was also a no.
correct.
And Kelly was a no. Okay, that one's down. All right, next up, we have a tax settlement with Upstate Tower. Can I get a motion?
So move.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Jim. This one looks like it came out okay.
I am very concerned again. I'll say it for the last time. Our assessor and assessment values vary greatly. These are invitations for others to join the bandwagon and jump on assessment of property. It's really disturbing. I'm glad there's a settlement, but it just is another.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? We have a bid award for the building condition survey. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Ira. Thank you, Janine. This is going to Young and Wright, who we worked with before. Any discussion? Well, yeah.
That's before 8.
I'm sure
We're
it's,
squabbled about 45 minutes.
sure it's in line with,
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Jumping to G, we have our New York State Association of Small City Schools membership. We want to renew.
So move.
Thank you, Mary.
second.
Thank you, Paul. Any discussion?
I'd like to see us more active as a district in this small city schools. They have their own conferences and their own sub-conferences in the statewide conventions. So I think that this is an important thing that we can take advantage of.
I agree with you, and I think Dr. Gielan has jumped in on some of those
I sure have.
meetings while she's been here, and we can certainly encourage.
They understand the uniqueness of a small city school district and have their own lobbying group. So our voices as small city school districts are being heard. And we saw that in the budget, the last budget from the state. So it's worthwhile not only to just to have that collective voice, but also to learn from some other colleagues in small city school districts.
So this would be the call I sat in on, I think. a
Yes,
couple
ma'am.
weeks ago. Now, how do we find out about additional calls? Because that was the first time I've ever been invited to sit in on something.
That was the first time they invited board members. Usually they just have superintendents do it. I was very pleased that we were the only district, might I say, that had board members on, and we had 2.
And-
That'd be the one I attended to, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
So is that something that we would typically be able to go to conferences and things on, or is that something the superintendent goes to? Because I recently went for Paul for the rural schools
Mhm.
in Cuba, and they encouraged us to go to their conferences and said those are open to the school districts, and that they bring in better speakers, they claim,
Yeah.
than this small city school district.
We don't, the small city school district, they don't have conferences. I think what you're referring to, Paul, was it, like at NISBA, they'll have a meeting and they get together. They don't have their own conferences and their own speakers. It's more of a lobbying group. What they do have is they have regular meetings have been Zoom meetings, but those regular meetings with the commissioner, which is very important. So that's the direct line to the commissioner. We also have regular meetings with state legislators. So it'll be with whoever at the time is going to be in charge of the education committee, that's scheduled time with that person. It's critical to move things in New York State.
Plus, there's always the convention. They'll have them gather.
And I think another thing to keep in mind, Kelly, is that the Alley Cat group is correct.
Yeah.
Right.
And they were
that
encouraging us.
They do
additional
have a strong link for advocating for rural schools. But I think we can maybe benefit from the best of both worlds, because let's face it, this is a unique community that we live in. We're kind of a rural community, but we're also a small city. And that's, I think that there are benefits to be had from both groups.
With that, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? All right, now we have an MOU with the Cornell Cooperative Extension for this has been coming, the Farm to School grant or contract.
So moved.
Thanks, Ira.
I will second.
Thank you, Mary. Any discussion?
I know.
Yes, really.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? We have an indemnification that we need to do. Thank you, Janine. Thank you, Jim. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? We are adding another special board meeting next week for superintendent interviews. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Thank you,
I'll
Mary.
second.
Thank you, Julio. Any discussion? 6:30.
So they're all 6:30.
6:30.
Okay.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? We have a retirement for William Taggarty as the records receiving and inventory clerk. Thank you, Janine.
Second.
Thank you, Paul. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? We have a custodian buildings and grounds maintainer retirement. It is Rick Eustace.
So moved.
Thank you, Mary. Yep. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Just losing a lot of good folks here this evening.
And you wish them well on their retirements and thank them for their long years of service, for sure.
Absolutely, absolutely.
In favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? We have a cleaner resignation for Terry Kale.
So moved.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Janine. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? We have a teacher aide resignation of Bailey McCullough.
So moved.
Thank you, Mary.
Second.
Thank you, Jim. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? We have a teacher aide resignation of Lindsay Green.
So move.
Jim? Thank you, Janine. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? We have a teacher aide resignation of Julie Jones. Thank you, Janine.
Second.
Thank you, Jim. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? We have a teacher resignation of Michelle Cortez.
So moved.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Janine. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? We have a teacher aide resignation of Allison Friends. Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Jim. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, now we come to the summer school appointments from the OTA. There's a long list there, which is good. We're gonna have a large program this summer, so that's good. Can I get a motion? Thank you, Janine.
This is just for the elementary,
Um,
or no,
Nope.
for all of them.
All of them, yep.
Yeah,
This
sorry.
is the OTA.
Second.
Thank you, Jim. Any discussion?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
How soon seeing what the offerings are for these summer schools and who they're going to?
They're working on the details for that now. We had it and it was on the agenda, but some things are still a little fluid and we didn't want to put it out there on what their assignments would be.
What does split mean?
I'm sorry? Oh,
Split?
they're splitting the position of that, I can tell you, is the librarian position, and they're splitting it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Abstentions? We have summer school appointments with the OESPA.
So moved.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Janine. Again, thank you to all those aides that are going to come and work in the summer as well. Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? All right, on to discussion items. We have the Title IX and sex discrimination policy that we're looking at for the third time.
Notice that one of the three changes that I had requested.
Oh, what changes did we miss? Maybe we can put them in here now?
Well, the two other changes that I had, where we had discussed operations, were one, making it clear that and utilize disciplinary conduct prior to applying trial that this policy calls for responsibility, that you don't have to wait to exercise the administrative rights that a principal has under the code of conduct until this whole, 90-day policy has been, it has taken effect. I mean, it's a policy that gives the respondent a series of procedural rights and creates a fairly laborious process. And we said, if you have to wait 90 days before you can take any disciplinary action under the code of conduct, you might as well not have it. Right. I mean, it's sort of silly. So that was one thing we discussed. And the other thing, and it's striking to compare the two sexual harassment policies that we have on the table before us. I pointed out, I think it's on page 12 or page 14, the respondent has the right under this policy to ask questions of the complainant about the complainant's sexual proclivities and sexual history. If it helps with the respondent's defense, either denying responsibility or it was consensual. I mean, what other defenses would you have to sexual harassment? I didn't do it, and if I did it, it was consensual. I mean, that's what everybody says. And so under those two circumstances, the respondent is entitled under this policy to question the complainant about the complainant's sexual proclivities and sexual history. These are teachers and students in our school. Are we going to have that part of every investigation? That's, I can't believe we're adopting a policy that allows anybody in a school disciplinary hearing to ask another student or a teacher about their sexual proclivities and sexual history. And we said we were going to strike that.
You're right. We did say we were going to strike it. We had gone back over both of our notes and looking at it. Somehow that had been overseen.
Yeah. And then,
Regarding the code of
Good
conduct,
catch. Janine. Thank you.
pardon me?
See what?
Good catch, Janine.
well,
We did agree to remove that, yeah.
we did, and then you had to be applying the code of conduct in there's supportive measures, right?
Well, where we have the
Yeah,
code of
right.
conduct,
Yes, it was right where,
It's right in that paragraph, right
yes,
underneath
and
there.
at the end of paragraph 4, where it says no disciplinary action can be taken prior to the grievance procedure being completed.
Right.
We said it's not, nothing in this policy precludes an administrator from taking, disciplinary action in accordance with the code of conduct. Because, I mean,
right, and so I did ask counsel about that one. And it was noted that that is an area that's iffy and it would depend on each individual situation. What became very clear is if you have something that would end up being under the code of conduct, if we enact the code of conduct, which is usually what we would do first thing, but it wouldn't be it would not necessarily be an issue. But to go and say that we would do it first or when we would do it, it would depend on that particular situation. And we would do that under the direction of counsel. Because there might be reasons why we would have to hold off, let's say if it was a superintendent's hearing, looking at a long time suspension, that we might have to wait until we go through the process.
So do we want to send this back and refine it
No.
again?
yeah, I mean,
I don't know.
Well, we could put in that that the code of conduct may be applied, but it more than definitely, I mean, that would happen anyway because of our code of conduct.
this policy. as
Policy,
written
yeah.
Implies you couldn't. I mean, it says, and I'll read it because Mary's got it.
Please do.
The district will follow a grievance process that complies with law and regulation
Before
before the imposition of any disciplinary sanctions or any other actions that are not supported. by-
I'm sorry, what page are you on?
At the bottom of page
I'm at the
4.
bottom of page 4.
Oh, I was
So
on
it basically
14,
says-
sorry.
The grievance procedure has to be fully
Yes, we have to
completed
follow that.
before
can
any
do
disciplinary measures can
anything
be
else.
taken. The only thing you can do before the completion of the full grievance procedure is to impose or allow for quote unquote supportive measures, which by definition are non-disciplinary. And secondly, are really
Non-disciplinary,
focused
non-punitive.
on the complainant, right?
Mhm,
There, and
correct.
it's kind of the blame the victim. It's like, if you're feeling sexually harassed, you've got a problem. So we'll get you some counseling and we'll make you feel better. And that's what you can do. You can't take any discipline against the respondent. Until this whole, this procedure is far more onerous than in the 6121 policy, which governs employees. And you just wait for, I mean, I can see there may be circumstances, I see what counsel is going for. I mean, there may be situations where you do need an outcome here. If you're considering, a serious long-term suspension, yes, there are procedural rights that children are entitled to. But if you've got somebody who puts a pornographic, poster on another kid's locker, the principal in this middle school or the high school or wherever it happens should be able to take disciplinary action against that kid and not wait 90 days while this whole process plays out.
I mean,
So we're talking about striking that last paragraph. The district will follow.
I don't think you need to strike it. I just think you need to say,
be clear.
yet, notwithstanding the above. the administration may apply discipline under the school's code of conduct when appropriate.
I had something here. What's this one?
And that was agreed upon in the committee, if I recall as well.
That was, I mean, we were discussing, does
Okay.
this apply to student versus
No,
student?
I read it. I just,
Yeah.
like, stop it. I mean, here's the deal. I don't think any of us like this policy, in all honesty, but we know that we probably need the title.
It's a
9.
required policy. We need something, yes.
So, I mean, it is, I mean, as I said in the operations, I spoke to 4 or 5 different people at 4 or 5 different districts that have all approved this specific contract policy, and then none of them like it. They've all agreed that it's just, hopefully it gets thrown out, like the baby in the bathwater. But until then, I feel like our due diligence is to try to at least have a policy that's fair to both sides, and that doesn't give unfair advantages to the person, the perpetrator, and feels like it's against the poor victim. So we're hoping that, and I think you agreed, Janine, confirm with me, did you not? That if we made some changes, that we would be okay to say, okay, with the idea that we realize these policies are flexible and that they're ever changing, and that we hope it changes soon. But we can at least.
And I believe everyone in the operations committee agreed to that,
We
for
did.
sure.
We did.
Yeah, and it was interesting that there was another presentation, I believe that Jenny had attended that presentation by Hutchison Russ, where they said, they reiterated the same things that we had heard previously and that we had heard from our training over at BOCES. So it's one of those, we're not happy about it necessarily, but it is a required policy that we've been without for a very long time.
Yes.
And to put something in, let's put it in with the kinds of amendments, and maybe we can agree to what those amendments would be. We apologize for missing out in the other 2, because when we discussed it, we both knew there was something else, but then our notes didn't reflect that. So in the district, we'll follow a grievance process that complies with law and regulation. Period.
Sure, that works. Yeah.
Sometimes less is more.
Yeah, no.
What did you just,
You just struck, you just took go back to page 4.
okay,
Take out before.
The district will follow a grievance procedure that complies with law and regulation, period.
period. Okay,
I'm happy with that.
all right.
Because even in the example that you talked about, look, having been in the shoes of the principal, I understand that would have happened. Someone would probably, even if that, it would be torn down, and maybe someone even spent some time after school in a detention, or there was a suspension before this would even be brought to the attention of the Title IX policy officer, would be my guess. So just in the normal course of doing business, yes, that would happen. The code of conduct is the thing that is enacted most often and most quickly.
I mean, I'm sure that's correct as an operational matter. I would hope that is. The trouble then is this policy becomes the sword.
Yeah.
It becomes what the aggrieved party relies on and comes to the school and says, you didn't give me my rights under this policy. And that's why enacting this policy, I think, is such a problem for the school, because it undermines your ability to maintain a disciplined environment for kids. And you'd think the people who are advocating for this policy, that would be a fundamental thing that everybody agrees. It's
True.
a prerequisite to genuine education.
Well, we've discussed how this isn't necessarily in a K-12 environment, but it also
Right,
comes back to
exactly.
complaints, right? So it's complaints that we receive. It's not, it doesn't have that standard that we should expect that this is underneath. This is when we get the complaint of it being sexual harassment. So it's not necessarily incumbent upon our administrator or assistant principal that when some incident happens to determine whether or not it was sexual harassment.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've beaten this to death, so.
So are we very clear on the?
Except for the page 14 edit. Let's get that too. And then we'll be clear.
Yeah, it might be page 12. It's where it says
Oh, yeah, I
that
just
you
wrote on it.
can have written, that the complaint, that the respondent can issue
I'm
written
getting it.
questions to the complainant.
God, I can't turn pages
And I
around.
remember that too.
Yeah, it's questions and evidence about a complaint in sexual predisposition or prior sexual will not be considered, period. Not unless. the
Wait, what
question-
page are you on?
I'm on page 14, right after letter C.
So you want 12.
No, page 14.
I was wrong about the page number.
So then if there's agreement with everyone else,
So we struck two sections. Page 14,
At the bottom of page 4
bottom of page 4.
and the middle of page 14.
So I think
Correct.
we're very clear on that. Does anybody else have any other questions on that? Because I would put this to a vote, if everyone's clear.
We can always amend it.
Can we get a clear reading of the new language as now edited?
I think we just did, Paul.
Yeah, well,
we did.
yeah,
So we just basically, it's the right page, sorry. So we,
all right, page 4 I got.
yeah, down at the bottom, we're just gonna say the district will follow a grievance process that complies with law and regulation
Right.
and get rid of any of the
Strike.
other stuff, right, yes.
Okay.
And then on page 14, we're gonna say questions and evidence about a complainant's sexual predisposition or prior sexual behavior will not be considered, period. Before it said unless, and blah, 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 it was all blah, blah, blah. We're just gonna stop right there. No question, no questions.
and the other change was made.
And then the other one was made, yes.
A very bad batting average, but we're there now.
Good. So I would look for a motion then to approve as edited.
So moved.
Thank you, Mary.
Sure.
Thank you, Jim. Final or last discussion? All those in favor?
I,
Aye.
Opposed?
I oppose. I gotta make a
you just
symbolic
a
vote.
snap.
Gotta keep going.
I share your concerns so much.
Yeah, and thank you for all your.
Yes, so much.
Yes, really.
Then you have absolutely no idea.
Yeah, give us a better one.
Only
We
the-
need one, I agree.
Yeah,
I just don't
yeah,
think
I
we need
mean-
a bad one.
It's just not the best,
More applicable to our K-12 situation.
yes.
Okay, then we got policy 4330, which is administrative staff. This is just a language adjustment.
Yes, we have a few language adjustments. We're just updating our policies.
Yes.
We're getting our
God bless, find and replace. Can we, for all of the readings, just approve this as a clerical thing?
The
We
whole
can-
group?
We can waive this.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think
Second
just,
reading.
Can we do it all at once or should we do it one at a time?
You can make a resolution to do them all at once if you'd like, for time's sake.
that would be
Changes.
great. That's B, C, D, and E, and
I
F.
went down to H.
Wait, oh, is it all the way down to H?
No,
No,
I think G had some substantial changes.
yeah, maybe,
Let's
maybe
just do
through,
it quickly, one at a time.
Oh, yeah.
yeah,
They're
maybe
only
we are.
gonna take.
All right.
Let's just, let's, yeah.
One at a time. Okay.
I move that we waive the second and third reading of the administrative staff and just adopt.
I'll second that. Mhm.
Thank you.
Any discussion?
Hmm.
All in Favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Looking for a motion for the same, for the school tax assessment.
So
collection.
moved.
Thank you, Mary.
Second.
Thank you, Janine. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Abstentions? Or 1, 2, for sale and disposal of school district property.
So moved.
I'll second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Abstentions? Again, for 20 inventories.
So moved.
Jim, thank you. Any discussion? All those in
That's all.
favor?
We're just changing it.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Is the same again in the energy conservation policy, 5650?
Yeah, it just becomes director of facilities. So yes, so moved.
I'll second.
All right, Mary and Julio, thank you. Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. Policy 6121, sexual harassment in the workplace.
Two parts.
Well, the one is the full. Yep, that was, I think, the older one, right? The second one is the revised one. Looks like it's red on.
Oh, here I was looking at this thing. It's just.
I mean, it seems to me that even though there were kind of technical changes to the policy, there weren't a lot of substantive changes.
No,
No,
And I think this is a much better policy.
right.
you know, I must agree.
It's no doubt.
This one went through operations, didn't it?
I don't think this
No,
one went through
it
operations.
did
We
not.
talked, I mean, it came up.
I mean, it came up,
indirectly,
but we did
didn't
not.
Look at it.
Right,
but-
when it came up, we went back and looked at it.
Yeah.
There are a list of policies, required policies that before I go, I'm gonna at least get them on your radar screen to make sure that if we haven't already done it, we're
But
looking
we
at it.
have this policy, right?
We do, but we didn't have the update.
Yeah.
So we also want to make sure that we're updating our policy, hence the last 4 that we just went through to make sure that it's reflective of our current titles and things like that.
I mean, I don't know about anybody else, but I didn't really have any objections to anything that was in this policy.
I didn't think so.
Full disclosure, I haven't had time to look at all of these policies. I'd be comfortable postponing this one until next month.
That's fine.
Yeah,
Yeah, we can do a second reading on that.
Yeah, that's
Oh,
fine.
sure.
yeah.
That's fine.
When was the last time this one was updated? Do we know? I don't see it on here.
I think offhand, I don't know, but it would be in your policy manual online. So under board docs,
I was gonna say, all
I
the
do
dates
not
on this
have
one
an
are
iPad.
changed to 2022
Yeah.
already, but they're not like.
I don't
redlined out.
recall looking at it since I've been on the
I
board,
don't
but I
either.
do know that it's based on, I mean, pretty much verbatim on New York state law.
But yeah, definitely, we can definitely, Paul, take some time and look at it. We can look at it,
Yeah.
bring it next meeting. Because there are some changes.
All right, so we'll circle back to that one. We'll move on to H, 6460, the staff use of computerized information resources. So we have some updates on that.
yes, I think we have some very good updates here. I want to recognize that this was updated. I know this is one that you're saying, but we just passed this. Yes, but policies are living documents. We got together with our teacher union president and our OASA president, and we just did some changes to it that make it more understandable, and they help to bring that lens of making it workable and understandable, I guess, too, for implementing it. We had a very strong, in all of our discussions, a strong focus on the implementation of this. They also provided some great suggestions on when and how and to whom we should be communicating this policy. So I don't think any of these changes are substantial changes or anything that has been taken away from it.
No, and I think we agreed in, because we did look at this one,
we
in
did.
operations, that while we feel it kind of takes a little of the teeth out of the policy, and we weren't all very happy about some of these changes, because we've spent a lot of time on this policy for about how many months, Kelly, did we say?
Too many.
We,
Years.
yes, we agree with the idea that if this policy is something that everyone can buy into and agree to, that it's our, that you will promote this policy, and that when you have new staff that is hired, that you're able to make it clear to them what the expectation of the policy is. Because we are not trying to stop people's free speech, not by any means, but we need people to stop and think before they just put things out there. We have an obligation and a responsibility as educators to be smart with our use of social media and what we're doing during the school day. So I think that's pretty much. Does anybody else have something that they wanted to add to that?
I just think this is the ultimate compromise. Mary, you pointed out some of the pullbacks, but it's the best we could come up with, I believe, at this point in time, and we need to keep revisiting this and other policies down the road.
We feel it's a very important policy and something that our district needs. So, and that being said,
And I think, I think some of the language that was taken out, and we're not objecting to it to being taken out, at least I'm not.
no,
It was kind of aspirational. And when we started discussing that policy, that's what we wanted. That we
Right.
were not going to be heavy on enforcement. You can't be heavy on enforcement. But we wanted to communicate a message to the community that, teachers and administrators in this district
you're being
do
held
have a lot of
responsible.
influence. And,
Yeah.
so just to to internalize and to take personal responsibility for the impact of your words.
Yeah.
Especially on people that are not, your close friends that you can come back and explain it to later. It's how are things heard by those who don't necessarily agree with you that is going to resonate, and, the negative effects will be exaggerated, because then, that the ball begins to spin and pick up momentum,
And we feel that
Move in
we're
directions
all
we
being
can.
held
yeah.
to this policy. I mean, it starts at the top. Income.
We have other local districts that have a more strict
Yes,
policy
yes, we do.
that, our specific lawyer has said she would enforce, that she wrote for other
Yeah,
districts.
Yep.
I did not really appreciate relooking at this
No.
policy again, to be honest.
we did.
Yeah, and I
So,
think
we
that's
did not.
understood, and I think that's appreciated. What I can't speak to is in another district, in any other district, quite frankly, how much attention is given to a policy and how successful and useful that policy is. The one thing I can say is whatever version we have right here, whether it's version 10 or 73, what we've ended up with is something that we've all spent a lot of time looking at. We all know it. We all really understand the wording here, and we've worked on it real hard to do so. That in and of itself is much stronger than having a very strict policy that no one even knows is there.
Yeah.
So we've already had those conversations about how do we enact this policy, right? And that's what you hire a superintendent for, is someone to carry out your policy. So the guidelines are already there. The expectations are there. And that's a strong thing too, that we have everyone that understands it, and they also want to have us hold others responsible and hold ourselves responsible when we're inducting new members into our employ, that they understand this is something that's important to us. We all agreed. We all came up with this policy. And I think that puts it out further ahead than the strictest policies that's in a book that nobody knows about. Not saying that that's what another district is
No.
doing,
But we agree.
and the press has already left the room, but I just want to
Yeah,
make
I
sure
know.
that I'm not making
You're
any
not talking-
disparaging remarks about any other
Yeah.
district.
I mean, that's the truth of this policy.
I think I really do mean it. I think that's a strength with where we are right now.
Well,
Can we call the question?
Thank you.
Waive second reading. But maybe-
I'm gonna call that a motion then.
Yeah.
Janine would like to make a motion to waive the second reading and approve this as changed.
Yeah.
Can I get a second?
Second?
Ira? Any more discussion?
I would feel more comfortable coming back to this next month. I really haven't had a chance to review it closely.
It sounds like
That's okay too.
Yeah, that's
I'd be willing to withdraw my motion and reconsider.
Honestly, I mean, if this policy is already in.
We already have
our
this
books,
policy.
It's already on it.
Right.
We already approved it in
What we're doing
January.
is-
I don't think that the changes that are
Tweaking it.
out there are gonna be any different next month than the changes that we're looking at right now.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
don't-
I would
For
be
April.
okay
I'm sorry, it
with,
was April.
I mean, it's gotta stay on the books, this policy, so I would say let's just make these changes and approve it, and maybe the state will finally come down and create their own policy
Oh,
that
stop
is
it.
actually real, right, Jim? That's what we say every time we look at this policy. Maybe the state will finally come out and put their own out.
Sure they will.
Yeah, someday. So let's just approve it, I mean, if we can,
All right.
because I'd hate to look at this policy one more
I
time.
know, I have to agree to
All right,
that,
I'm
in
gonna
all
call the-
honesty.
The vote then. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstent? Moving on, policy 7552.
Maybe we can send the state our policy and make it. look
Gender
at it.
identity. This is the third reading. We made some changes, going back to operations. Any discussion on this one?
Yeah, I think we talked about it going to the DEI committee and that never happened.
Did you or did you not talk about this at DEI?
We did not.
Did not. Wasn't that the agreement that we had?
I thought it
last time?
was.
No,
No, I
It
don't
was
think
not.
was.
it was discussed. It was not sent to DEI. It was told then to go back to operations, which is where it went. It was part of
We
a
did talk about it,
discussion,
Yep.
but it was not to go back to E DEI.
I can say that, the conversation and operations was around trying to make the policy to incorporate as much discretion. That is, the goal was, the vision is that any student that wants to express themselves as a gender inconsistent with their birth gender, there is a planning meeting at which a parent will be present. And,
Unless,
well, there was no unless.
No, there wasn't unless,
there was an
and I
unless.
believe it's in here.
It is, I think.
I know we talked about
We
it,
did.
So let's just see if it actually made it to this part.
But, the idea was there would be this planning meeting, and the planning meeting would address each of the kind of aspects that would be necessary for that student to participate in school life. And that's as really as much as we needed to say.
No, and I thought we added, I thought, and I could be wrong, I thought we added a sentence or a paragraph or something to the beginning of all of this that said something along the lines of a plan will be made to, and then address all of the things
Yes,
below.
that's what I thought too.
And I
It's
thought-
down on
It's
that paragraph,
down
when
at the
apprised of a student's
bottom.
transgender. That's about the plan. We'll engage the student and the parents or guardians in effort to agree upon a plan that will accommodate the student's individual needs at school.
So we said
Who is-
transgender and GNC students have the right to discuss and convey their gender identity and expression openly and to decide when, with whom, and how much to share this confidential information. That maybe is the piece that we're talking about where we left it up.
It's the next line after it about the plan.
Not to be picky, but I think there's a typo.
Yes, standardized tests, certain, such as state, I think that's all supposed to be one. But that's supposed to be up here. Supposed to be part of that one.
It is in the finalized version. What you have in front of you is
Is
the,
that- yes,
it's
it's
the
here,
marked up
yeah,
version.
yeah.
In the final version, it doesn't look like that.
I mean, I guess we did, I don't know, trying to remember because it was last week and we were trying to get it up. All right, so did we say whether it was important in the beginning or the end, whether we said that, I mean, I think the main idea that we want with this policy is that every student is treated individually, that this is not a cardboard policy box that everybody just fits into. Oh, you say, oh, okay, well, we'll just put you in this. That the main idea with this policy is that we want there to be, we want to engage parents, we want to engage students in an effort to agree upon the best plan. So it may be different for this student in as far as, you know, this, that, and the next thing, but this student may need more of this. And so I think that was our plan, was to not, sometimes you put so much in a policy and then you're stuck specifically with what that is. And my thought was that we were opening this up and we will, which is what I think we're doing right now anyways, is that when we have this, we're looking at every student as an individualized student. And then this is what's best for you. Well, what's the plan so that we can respect where you are and what your decision is and what can we do as a school district to support that? Is that right?
It's truly the intent of the policy.
So I, unlike the staff communication policy, where I felt we took stuff out and kind of, I was hoping with this that we were actually opening it up a bit more to make it really individualized for every student.
Yeah, I mean, that was the intent.
Yeah,
when we
that was
switched
certainly
from
my
one
vision.
longer
Yeah.
policy to the shorter policy was to make it so it could
it's not
have
anything
more room to be.
Specific that
And
you're
it
all,
wasn't-
okay, so you're all here, here's your policy, this is it, you know, I mean, that everybody, so, I mean, whether that's at the beginning of the policy or at the end of the policy, I don't think we were.
I mean, and quite honestly,
specific.
either policy both incorporated the idea of having to have a plan. It
Yes,
was just the other policy was more like this could be your plan, whereas this just says we will create the plan.
right,
I mean,
when
and
we are
whatever
advised
that
of
plan
it,
may be,
we
it
will
may- it
engage the
may
students,
consist
and
of
their
these
parents.
things,
but
but it's not necessarily limited to those things.
But it
either.
also says right under there that they have the right, those students have the right to decide when, with whom, and how much to share of this confidential information. So if they come forward and they say, this is what I want, and I don't want my parents to be contacted on this, we have to respect that student's wishes, that they do not want their parents. I believe that we have to, and that's what I think this policy says, but maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, I thought it was just the opposite. I thought we make it that the first step is to make the plan. And the plan is done by a group of people. And that group of people includes the child
Yeah,
and the parent.
That's not how
No,
that's not
I
how
can't.
That's,
I'm with Mary. I've said before and will again repeat, some kids have struggles. And if they don't want to tell their parents, I don't think the school should. That's a matter for an individual to make. We help them, we guide them, we have professionals to assist, but no, it ain't parents first. We ain't blowing the whistle on kids. That would be wrong.
it's not as though the school is going to go and quote unquote, out some kid. The thing is, what the child is asking is for the school to support and to create accommodations for their decisions.
Yes.
And that's where I believe very strongly, and maybe there's a carve out for situations of physical danger, that this is a very significant decision in a child's life. Not that they're just, experimenting, but they want the support of the institution of the school, which is a really big deal, in my opinion. And if that's the case, if they are saying to their teachers and to the administrators and to their peers, I want to be able to use a restroom that is inconsistent with my birth gender. I want to be called a name that is not consistent with my birth gender. I want to be treated as a different gender. That the idea that a child makes that decision without, and again, it's not just a kid that comes to school in odd clothing. This is a child who's saying, school, you treat me as a different gender. And at that point, I think a parent needs to be involved in that decision making, or we're going to end up with some kids making some really bad decisions and some parents feeling very betrayed that the school is not supporting their, investment. I mean, who cares about a kid more than their parents? Nobody.
I know, and I know, I understand exactly what you're saying. I do. And as a parent myself, I feel exactly what you're saying. But as a teacher in a high school, I see situations where I'm just going to tell you, it's not going to be in that child's best interest to involve that parent or caregiver. I see it every day.
I think this builds a lot of conflicts, or has the potential to build conflicts, because you have the rights of the child and student to the rights of the parent, and they can conflict, and there may be home issues. And at what age should it be age appropriate for the student? I don't know.
So we've asked that pointed question of
Yes, we have.
council. And it's not a matter of age, because one of the first questions when the concept of a carve out was raised, we did ask that. And if the student is the driver here, that under civil rights law, the student is the driver and it's about the student. But that doesn't mean that we don't include parents when it's appropriate and as often as possible.
And that's a judgment.
But we're respectful and we understand. Yes, it does come down to a judgment.
And we
As
have to. and we
often
are
in the
putting it
counseling
those
world, it does.
professionals' hands. Yes,
Correct.
that they know these students and that they can assess the situation and that they know the families and they can decide, here's what I think we should do. But I still think if you've got a student who truly feels like, I don't want to involve my family, I think we have to respect that. I do. That's just me, to me.
So in the very first paragraph, the last sentence, it says the district will assess and address the specific needs of each student on a case-by-case basis. And to me, that would include the needs of involving the parent or not
Absolutely.
involving the
Absolutely.
parent. So I think we've covered it.
I mean, and that's what we were trying to do with.
I
with
mean,
the
I
policy,
think
the way
that
we've written it.
that covers that. I think the question would be in the next paragraph down on the second page, where it specifically says, we will engage the student and their parents or guardians in an effort to agree upon a plan. I think, it should again say the same thing. On a case-by-case basis, we will engage, and that should cover that. The school is doing its due diligence to engage those parents when it is appropriate.
Right.
and not when it's not appropriate.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I feel like I've said my piece many, many times, but you know, a school counselor has 100 kids or more that they're responsible for. They might spend, what, 2 half-an-hour sessions with a kid? I mean, in elementary school, I don't know if my child ever saw a counselor on her own. I mean, when she saw counselors, it was like lunch with a group of, 5 or 6 kids. I don't think the counselors really had time to give individual counseling. I'm not sure that's really part of their job.
Well,
mean,
they
I
do
feel-
some individual counseling and our counselors. We have staff members who they have tremendous training. They do lethality assessments. They do, when you think about the training and the nature of their positions, it's not a matter of providing the same level of counseling to all students in their caseload, for sure. We have counselors who spend less time with a number of students, and maybe it's more of that school counseling on the courses they're going to take, and it's that annual touching base. And then we have our counselors are with some students a tremendous amount of time, a tremendous amount of
But not,
time.
I mean, even if they were seeing a counselor for an individual session, twice a week, right? They're in high school, 180 days a year for 4 years. And so you're talking a handful of hours compared to 15 years of living with a child every day. And, I just don't see that there is any way that a professional counselor, no matter how well trained they are, can know a child the way a parent knows a child. Again, maybe what we're really coming to the same point, which is if the parent is going to be an asset for the child in this situation, and I think most of the time they are, right? I mean, what we're talking about is a very, very, very difficult thing to do. That's what I keep hearing from people who've gone through these transitions. It is hard. You get harassed. You are in danger of being assaulted. You are not welcome. It is a really difficult thing to do, and to say, we're going to take a child and make them do it by themselves because they're saying they don't want their parents to know. I mean,
But the idea is
everybody
that-
doesn't want to tell their parents stuff when they're teenagers.
But the idea is that they're not doing it alone. That's what the
Well, they're
policy is
doing-
supposed to be. Is that
Janine, I appreciate your point, but I respectfully disagree.
Well, I feel like I've made my point enough times, and I'm not going to.
I don't understand why it's so hard to just send it to people who actually experience this and see what their point of view is. We created a work group for what reason if we're not going to consult them on their opinions on matters that affect them?
Well, if you're suggesting that it be sent to other members of our community, I only ask that we be very specific on what we're asking for. Because other than that, it would just be a, what do you think about this policy?
I know.
And I just think that if I'm then to direct someone to do that, or if I'm going to carry it out myself, there needs to be something more specific, please, especially after all of the conversation about this policy that we've had.
Yeah,
We are not gonna create a perfect
I-
policy.
no.
So, I mean, what we have is acceptable, it's better, more input would be great.
Can we not approve the policy and get input down the road, as Julio suggested? So there is an official starting point and some degree of closure that the community and others have asked for?
That's a good suggestion, Ira. I do think that there is some inconsistency with the 2 sentences, as Kelly indicated.
I think we should make the 2 sentences match.
Agreed.
I mean, so it would be the second last paragraph on the second page. When apprised of a student's transgender or GNC status, the district will engage the student and their parents or guardians in an effort to agree upon students' individual needs at school. And I think it should read as the first one does, on a case-by-case basis, the school will engage.
after when apprised of a student's transgender identity status.
I mean, it
on a
honestly,
case-by-case
where it says like
basis.
when apprised of, I don't even know if that's the right words, because I mean, to me, when I read that, I'm thinking like, okay, so I'm a counselor and there might be a student in a classroom and the teacher comes to me and says, hey, I think maybe this student is going through some form of something. And then the counselor goes to them and maybe says, hey, we should make a plan. I don't think that's what we're talking about here either. I think we're talking about students who are
Right.
actively coming to
Yes,
somebody and saying, I need help.
right.
I need a plan. I want things to change for myself.
Upon
So
consideration.
I don't know that when apprised of is really the right wording there. Because to me, the people who are really going to use this policy are people who want a change for themselves. They
Right.
want something
Yes,
that they don't feel they're getting.
right.
And we're trying to make a plan for those individuals. We're not trying to make a plan for every single student in the school district and saying, hey, do you want to be transgender today? Like, we can help you with that. Like, these
Right.
are people who, they do
Come.
feel a certain way.
Right.
They do want a change for whatever reason that is. So, I mean, this isn't just like, hey, do you want to do something different today? Like, I mean, these are really very specific.
Yeah, I think
cases.
that what it meant by the when apprised of a student's would be when the district learns about it. And that's learning about it either through the parent or through the student. It's, there either channel of information could be opened. And that's just why it says when apprised of it. But we can certainly change that to something else if you think that's going to be better understood.
Upon consideration.
Well, we don't want to make it
Not
sound like we're
considering.
considering something, where it's when we
We're
learn.
doing this.
Right, that's just why it says when apprised of a student's transgender GNC status. No, because it's also when I shouldn't do that, sorry. So if one would ask if it means when a student is, no, it's not, because as I said, you can often find out from, from a parent.
Right.
So if we're apprised of it from the parent saying, we've been working with our family physician and other, or, maybe other counselors or our family has gotten together, we learn through a parent as well.
So what about like when a request is made?
We don't want to put the onus on them for making a request. It's that's why it says when, I don't know if we're over wordsmithing this.
I know.
It's really,
I think it's probably the way it's written. It's
We
probably
can
appropriate.
always
What
change
applies,
it.
when it's
Yeah.
brought to our attention, however it is brought, I mean, it's, hopefully through a student or a parent, but once we know,
or
then
family guardian.
it's family guardian, yes, that we'll engage everybody that we can to make the best plan possible.
Is that what it says?
Says when apprised of a student's transgender or GNC status, the district will engage the student and their parents or guardians in an effort to agree upon a plan that will accommodate the student's individual needs at school. And that transgender and GNC students have the right to discuss and convey their gender identity and expression openly, and to decide when, with whom, and how much to share this confidential information. And then we go into what the plan may therefore include.
So I guess I would just say, I would propose changing it to when apprised of a student's transgender or GNC status, the district on a case-by-case basis will engage the student and their parents or guardians in an effort. And leave it. I think that makes the two sentences compatible, or at least
So at least
Consistent.
matching the district rules.
Doesn't it mean though, on a case by case, when you're engaging the student and their parents? But if you want to add it in,
I
you
don't-
can
I
add it
mean-
in. I don't think it's,
I guess to me, the adding on a case-by-case basis would mean that in some instances, the parents might not be involved. We're not making that be a mandatory portion of it.
Are we talking about
In my,
whose rights supersede whose rights here. I mean, and so this is really a question of law and child protection. It seems to me that,
Can cut both ways, child
yeah,
protection.
well, certainly it can. But I'm not comfortable with this. And honestly, I haven't had a chance to review the latest revision.
Oh, we're gonna tell you that we want you to be prepared when you come to
I know.
to
Yeah,
these
yeah, that'd be-
meetings
I
so
know.
that you're, you
I-
know, I mean, we understand, you know,
Wish
we
I had more
had a
time.
lot going on and everything.
Right.
I think one of the revisions we made a while back, where we deleted the when appropriate,
We did, as
does
appropriate.
cover the on a case-by-case basis, and it was after with their parents or guardians when appropriate. But there was a lengthy discussion about it, and then that was removed. Is that perhaps something you'd like to consider putting back
Put it
in?
back in. No, we,
Well, it just sounds like, don't shoot the messenger. It
I know.
sounds like that's what we've come back around to, that would capture the case by case, and also that idea of there are times when it is appropriate, and there's an understanding that there are times when it is not.
I mean, then it gets pushed back to who makes that appropriateness
Yeah.
decision.
I think that's why
And
we
that's, you know,
struck it.
and that's where I struggle. It's like, you know, I think that's a huge burden to place on a counselor. I think our policy should have a presumption, because I think kids do things for the wrong reasons sometimes. And I think it's really hard for, no matter how well trained you are, for somebody who's known a kid for 6 months or 8 months and has had 5 hours of contact with them, to really fully comprehend where that kid is coming from and what their motivations might be without engaging a parent.
Okay, so
especially when
far,
they're
we've been
12.
considering the policy from the district's perspective, but think of the policy from the parent's perspective. If the parent is contacting the district, this says, the district, you will engage me because I'm bringing this up. Maybe it's not the counselor at all, and we should be thinking in terms of this policy. It's also providing that right to the parent, that the parent is saying, I'm enacting this policy and you will engage me and my student to put together a plan that's appropriate for my child. We don't say in here who it is. We don't give it a title, and because it's not always the district that's initiating this. The initiation and the request could be from a parent. And I just put that out there for your consideration.
Right.
Keep it open-ended.
Well, that's,
Okay, is there a motion on the board there, Mr. President?
No, there's not.
Okay.
Somebody make a motion? Willing to entertain.
I'm not even sure what we finally agreed to. to be
Right,
honest.
right, what are we moving at?
Well, are we making any changes or what?
Well, I think Kelly did suggest a change.
Yeah.
And then Dr. Gillen suggested reintroducing the words as appropriate with respect to parental involvement. And I think that's where there's a disagreement. And I mean, there are certain versions I could accept and certain versions that I would vote against. And I feel like, you know, I don't know if you're going to, I mean, I don't want to beat a dead horse here. I've said my piece many times, you know what I think. And if it's going to be adopted in spite of what I say, that's fine. I mean, I'm willing to not win this one. So,
It's
you
not
know,
about
if everybody else is in agreement, then you know, I'll vote no, depending on the wording. Most of this I agree with, but there are some things I don't, and it's pretty clear where I stand.
You want to send it back?
I'm still not sure though, in terms of state law, what are we saying that the parents' rights possibly supersede those of the minor child?
We've already
Or-
decided it's a student-driven policy.
Well, I mean, I think you're asking a very good question, Paul. minors don't have a full panoply of rights. I mean, to a certain extent, you're like, unemancipated minors there are some things they can't decide themselves, like whether to get married, for example, or, they can't drive a car. It's not as, children are not mini adults. They
That's
have
right.
circumscribed rights. And I'm not sure exactly where those fall, but this policy, except for the records piece, is not grounded in state law. It is guidance that has been issued interpreting civil rights policies, but there is no law that clearly decides exactly what the parameters of minors' rights are. And frankly, a minor that is of an age to be emancipated, which would be 16 or older, and some of them are living on their own by that age, unfortunately, they have a different set of rights than a 14-year-old or a 12-year-old or a 10-year-old. So it's not an easy legal question to answer.
So the question is,
Right.
is this policy acceptable in its form right now, open to modification, which it will be modified constantly probably?
Yes, and it's consistent with what has been provided by policy services. So to my best estimate, I'd have to say yes.
I'm comfortable with it.
Can I just, so we can be clear, which version are we talking about now? Is that the district will engage on a case-by-case basis?
With the change.
Is that the change?
I don't know. I mean, you can put it in if you think it's important. to
Are
put it
you
in.
comfortable with that, Mary?
I'm comfortable with the policy as it's written right now, without adding the case by case because, or the as appropriate, or the will endeavor to, I just think it's succinct. It will engage the student and the parents in an effort to agree upon a plan. I feel like that means that it's kind of on a case by case basis. I get the idea it's individualized, and that those students have a right to discuss and convey with whomever and how much, and it's a confidential. It's up to them to decide. That's what I'm comfortable with. But
I'm with Mary as written.
If
I don't
you're
think you really
comfortable
need to
with it,
add in
that's-
case by case. It's already covered in one section. It applies to the entire policy. So it's just basically piggybacking or dovetailing.
My only concern is confidentiality in terms of like child protective services. If a child says, my parents are beating me or abusing me in some fashion, that could be physical, it could be psychological, it could be emotional. I just want to be sure that we're not crossing a line here in terms of the child's rights and the parents' rights superseding the child's rights. And that's what I'm really not sure of. How far this confidentiality goes, because it seems to me that, yeah, we are putting a big onus on a counselor, and the counselor could be a school psychologist, could be a social worker, it could be a guidance counselor, it could be a teacher, it doesn't, it could be an aide, could be anyone. And I don't know, I'm not comfortable with the whole thing, the way it is now. I do.
I don't understand. Like, so what part are you talking about?
It doesn't
Well,
have-
I guess my bad. I'm just not sure where that line is when what we're saying, you know, as long as we're protecting the child's right to privacy, I guess that's what,
That's what I was, my hope was,
Yeah.
that's what we're saying, that,
all right.
that they have that opportunity to decide when, with whom, and how much to share this confidential information. I thought that line sort of says that, but
Okay.
maybe I,
Just keep in mind, it's gonna be constant changes with regards to either state law when they decide to make a statewide policy and or lawsuits or whatever other may be. So it's gonna be a fluid policy.
I mean, again, I think it's important to understand that just because we're looking at this policy now, doesn't mean that that this hasn't been already going on, okay? So, I mean, this is us trying to catch up with what's already been happening in our schools. So this is us running behind the bus
Right.
saying, hey, you know what? I mean, this stuff has already been happening. I think they deserve a policy that says what we are already doing. I believe in my heart that what we are already doing for children, for students.
Well said, Mary. I think reflects reality and the times we're in. And to Paul's point, it does, I think, protect kids. Very much so.
So moved,
To accept as written.
as written.
Thank you, Jim.
I'll second.
Any other discussion?
Yeah, I just think it needs to be looked at by DEI somehow or another.
It should be looked at by DEI, right? So-
Yeah.
Oh, that's,
Yeah, I think that's an understanding that this is going to be reviewed by DEI.
No, I don't think that that's the understanding necessarily.
No?
I wouldn't understand it that way, that it would be constantly reviewed. I mean, I think if there's specific questions that we want to submit to the DEI committee regarding what this statement or what
Yes,
this
ma'am.
policy says, we need to decide what those questions are and then send them over directly, but I don't know what my questions would be to send. So, I mean,
I also
that,
think that
but I,
as a board, we're open to specific.
if there's questions that somebody wanted to
Yeah.
put out and say, hey, we're questioning this about the policy, if we couldn't answer those questions, maybe at that point, we could submit those questions to DEI and, or if any other board members have specific questions regarding it, we could submit those, but I mean, personally, I don't have any additional questions, and if we were to adopt this tonight, I would hope not to see it again for another 2 or 3 years.
But
As we've
but-
seen
I
already,
mean,
yeah,
unless
that
But
we
as
can certainly
things
see
came
that.
up.
but a month later, we can.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean,
So,
We could.
you know, and
I would
that's,
hope not to.
and
I would
that's,
like to
and
see
that's
specific
fine.
questions about
Yeah.
the policy or
Yeah, I mean,
specific-
I wouldn't want to relook at this policy unless somebody has something specific to offer to it and then submit that specific thing to DEI. I mean, because I don't know, looking at this, I don't know what I would ask of DEI to do with it. At least for me. I don't want to ask to do differently. I think what we would ask of DEI maybe would be to say, hey, this policy is out there. Do you have suggestions as to how we use it? You know, how we enact it? If people were to come to us, what are the types of things you would want, you know, hope to see in this plan that would be helpful to the students who need to use this policy, right? I mean, I don't know, maybe I'm
And
wrong.
I think that's
but that-
procedural stuff.
That's what yeah, I mean, because we're creating a policy and then DEI, which is the work group that has to actually work with the policy we've created, should be asking the questions of, hey, this policy is out there. what types of procedures are we doing to make this policy work for our individual students,
But the
right?
person you're going to ask that of is the superintendent, remember, because that's what you hire a superintendent to do.
Right, but then would the
It-
superintendent use that group to,
The superintendent would use a number of groups.
okay,
And would also be responsible for putting together procedures and regulations for that policy, just like every other policy.
okay.
A couple things that I would be concerned about. We don't want to, first of all, we don't want to abuse a particular work group that has a charge and something they're working on, or make them feel like they're personally responsible for anything in the district pertaining to. I think that's something to be careful of. And our DEI work group is working on a number of diversities and looking at equity and in inclusion throughout the entire district. And right now, with the recommendations that they're working on, and that process that's associated with a huge framework project, I don't know, maybe we just called it something, but the framework project, that's, I think, informing a policy and also informing on how well, once it's enacted, that in providing the feedback on how well it's working can be very, very helpful. But we don't want to put that full responsibility on people in a work group who are charged with another charge.
And I mean, I guess I only bring up that it would go back because it keeps coming up that the DEI committee, or at least certain members of that committee, seem to feel that this should fall under their purview. So to me, I'm just trying to think, okay, if they were to have some say in this, it would be on the procedure and not necessarily the creation of the policy. So, I mean, I guess that's what I'm going. I'm not saying they should take it on, just that if the group were to take it on, it might be.
I think it's important, when we are looking at these policies and adopting these policies, that yes, that, we're taking into consideration all opinions and ideas, but I think yes, it really does come down to us as board to make these policies and to support these policies as they are written. So while I do value the DEI and their opinions and that, I don't want to find ourselves getting into a habit where we're referring every time we're looking at a policy to some other group or something like that, when it's not maybe always necessary to do that. So, I mean, I feel this policy says what I think it needs to say right now. I'm quite certain that we will be looking at it again. I don't know how soon, but I feel we will, because I believe it's a very timely matter. And you can put your head in the sand and you can pretend or whatever you want, but it's happening. And so we need a policy that addresses it, and we'll put it back in your lap as to how it's going to be. That's what I
Get back to the vote then on this. Favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
I'll abstain.
Julio
I'm
abstained.
abstaining.
All right, next up on the agenda is informational items. A lot going on this month.
Need for executive session.
For the purpose of
Nice
negotiations.
try, Jim.
Yes, we have an executive session need for negotiations. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Julio.
Sure.
We have no personnel issues to discuss.
Not this meeting, Paul.
Any discussion?
You want to invite?
Are we invited?
We'll invite them, but let them know that they're certainly welcome to decline the invitation, Mr. Wolf and Mrs. Pilata.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.